So we're going to jump right in. Welcome, everyone. We're really going to focus on electric planning reports, our electrification. We've got heat pumps happening, energy planning happening for communities. We're going to walk you through the electric planning report requirements and then kind of look at the backside of the practicality of it. It's almost like the things you really need to know. So John Foster, who is a Strata Energy advisor, from Zeke is here, and we're going to talk about that program a little bit at the end, as well as it's a no-cost support program for strata corporations who want to evaluate their energy needs, their uses, and their capacity as they go forward. So without any further delays, thanks so much also to the Strata Property Agents of BC who are sponsoring today's seminar. I know there's quite a few agents and managers who are online today for the session, so welcome and thanks so much for participating. We really appreciate that. Little privacy stuff, if you ask a question in the Q&A, just keep personal information or information that identifies your strata corporation out of the document, and then we can protect everybody's privacy as we go along. So we start out with what we really need, and this is the same for depreciation reports as well as electric planning reports. You really need to gather all of your documents. It makes this whole process so much quicker and so much more streamlined. Building envelope assessments, if you have them, Form Bs, if you have them. But as we're dealing with electric planning reports, it's really the utility bills, depreciation reports, and alteration agreements. If we're dealing with things like heat pumps or installation for alterations for units, these are going to become material documents that your depreciation planners, as well as the person doing your electric planning reports, are going to rely on. Utility bills, both gas and hydro, are critical because they're going to show trends in consumption as we go along. And trends in consumption help to establish what the future demands are going to be. Electric planning reports, size matters. If you're in a strata of 5 or more units, you must have a report. It's a one-time report. So I think it's important to remember that when you're doing this, get it right the first time. You're not going to take another swing at this, and you certainly don't want to be paying for it twice. When you look at things like electric planning reports, it's also really helpful to look at the major repairs in the next 5 years. We have the conversation quite often under depreciation reports. Are we replacing like for like? And this comes up quite frequently. Now we have jurisdictions that are changing. So if you have a makeup air system, and this is where it becomes material, you have a makeup air system in your building, and it's currently just gas for the purpose of heating in the wintertime, but doesn't do cooling, you'll find that what's coming are transitions. City of Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, the transitions will be, the upgrades are going to have to be heat pumps to provide cooling in the summer as well. Not yet on the books everywhere, but it will be coming. So, we need to start thinking about what those implications are going to be as we go ahead. This regulation came into effect in 2023. It was fully effect December of that year. The compliance requirements or dates depend on your zone and your location. So Metro Vancouver, Metro Victoria, 2026 by the end of this year. Outside of this zone, basically end of 2028. Electric planning reports are the whole purpose. And I'm going to let John get into this a little bit for you too, because I think this is really important. They evaluate your usage, your capacity, your current, but your future demands that you're going to be going forward with. 5 units seems really quite small to be doing this, but we do have buildings, condo buildings that are 5 units, 1 unit per floor, and they have substantial demand. So John, I'm going to let you jump in on this, because this is where regulation really is the key about, why are we doing this?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So the goal of the regulation really is to help stratas. It's to help avoid problems that are coming as stratas get older and as summers get hotter and warmer and some people age a bit, then we have a strong need for cooling. And as you all know, there's a lot of demand for people getting heat pumps, putting in portable AC units, finding other ways of keeping cooler. And electric cars are also very popular, and there's a lot of demand on councils and property managers. So if everyone just added them willy-nilly, there could be a lot of problems going forward. So the point of this is to avoid those problems, see how much capacity you have, and see how you can improve the ability to go forward. And the contents of them, really, they just say what is the current use of the in the strata, what is the current capacity, what can you handle, and then if you add more heat pumps and cars, at what point would you need to think about upgrading your electric system, either the capacity coming in, the transformer distribution inside the system somewhere. It is very rough at this point, these EPRs. It's very difficult to kind of put together a complete picture because, of course, the future is unknown in terms of how many heat pumps you will have demand for in electric vehicles. Um, Back to you, Tony.
I was going to say, John, it's also a scenario where this is the one-time report, and it's a little bit of a crystal ball thing because nobody can really say, well, geez, what's this community going to be using for demand 10 years from now?
Hmm.
So it really is a little bit of a challenge, kind of opening up that it is a bit of a can of worms in some of these
Yeah,
communities, right?
it
And
is. Yeah.
especially if there's a limit, because towards the end we're going to talk about it. Who gets the power first is the problem if you don't have enough capacity.
Hmm. Yeah. So hopefully these reports will clarify that. People are finding them a little difficult to read sometimes, hoping that it would be a crystal ball and a perfect plan, but it's actually more of a kind of an opening to figure get a handle on this early on.
So we have a bulletin with a number of these information details in it. I'm not going to read it and go through it, but here's the two basic areas for the deadlines. 2026, as I said earlier, it's basically Fraser Valley, Metro Vancouver, and the south of Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands. So that's this year. End of this year, do your best to get the process started, to get your reports done by this time. All the other areas of the province, rural areas, they're all going to be 2028. So, we do have time, but it's amazing how quickly 2026 came up on top of us from when this legislation came in. So here's the basic outline of the reports. Electric use, capacity in communities, the current demands, your potential future demands, and this is where we get the crystal ball problem, the impact of conversions, because they certainly do have some implications for us, potential new demands and options for energy management that we have. So the current use of electrical services is on your utility bills. Gas is also important, though. So BC Hydro can provide an aggregated report. If you're in a building of 60 units, or you're in a bare land strata of 40 units, BC Hydro can give you an aggregated report that doesn't identify single units. So there's no privacy breaches, but that's the information in detail that your planner needs to know. Um, how to when you're doing this, John? Though same token, we've got a current use of gas. Let's say for a boiler that's providing heating, hydronic heating in a building, and there's lots of older buildings in the province with that. But how does a depreciate a planner that's doing these reports? How do they figure out what energy demand that is?
Yeah, exactly. That's really the hard part, Tony. The electrical part is much easier, as you said, unless it's in some jurisdictions where they cannot aggregate. But on the gas side, it's easy to just look at it and say, well, it's a huge boiler. It must have a huge amount of power. But as people probably realize, gas boilers, domestic hot water, makeup air, the usual gas uses are kind of oversized, often by a factor of two or to three. So what we're seeing so far is that people doing the reports are mostly not getting gas bills. So they tend to use that method where they just look at the size of it and they convert that to electrical power. So that's they may be giving you kind of a warning, a heads up, but you need to look at it more in depth. And some providers hopefully will actually look at the gas bills themselves and be able to project on the line what we call a heating degree day regression is the ideal way to do it. There's some simpler ways just to say that even though the boiler is that big, you don't have to put an electric replacement for it that's exactly the same size.
I'm sure we'll have questions about that. So here we are in capacity. This is a big discussion that a lot of people have, and I think Bearland stratas and townhouses. I think people have a little misinformation because they all say, "Well, we all have our own panels, we all get our own bills. Doesn't that mean that we're not part of the collective?" But that's not really the case in almost all of them.
Yeah.
So when we're determining capacity here in the communities.
Yeah. So there's several different places. Townhomes are quite different from apartment buildings, but in all cases, there are several different places where you might have capacity restricted. One is from the utility coming in, which is something you generally don't get the answer to until you ask them that you want more, that you're planning ahead for electric cars and heat pumps and AC. Another pinch point is the wires coming into the building, the transformers, which you might have in a on pads around in a townhome complex or in the basement of a apartment building. And the main switches, the fuses, the bus bars, the wires throughout the building, and particularly the wires to the meter centers. Larger apartment buildings have batches of meters in one electrical room. And so those wires can be restricted as well. So the EPR should look at all of those and see which places they are restricted.
So it's interesting. So we do actually already have issues around demands. So, we talk about often the consumption in common areas, stratolots, mechanical systems, all of this starts to mount up. And, we oftentimes don't talk about the necessity of routine maintenance, cleaning, and inspection to ensure these systems are operating efficiently, because they overdraw power when they're not. So, as we're going through our demand cycles, consumption is it's a significant issue, but the planner has to evaluate also the demands within stratalots. And this becomes more important in townhouses and in barelands where historically the units have been heated through gas heating, through forced air gas, which has a low power draw, but conversions to heat pumps dramatically increase the demand. What's the grade, the kind of the grade level of demand that increases?
The grade level of
So
from going from a gas furnace to a heat pump.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That's a difficult one. Whenever you have gas heat in particular, either a gas furnace or a gas boiler in an apartment building, that's the part where it's most difficult, where you have a more significant demand coming in to replace that with a heat pump. Um, and within the panel of the building, often it's not a problem. The apartment itself is not a problem. It's more the wire coming into the whole building because they intended to use gas to provide that power. Now, if you're going to switch it to electric, if you're going to put in AC units or heat pumps, um, it's a lot more for the gas heated apartments.
and we go across this frequently around EV charging, EV ready plans. We have heat pump installations and stratalots, both for apartments and for townhouses. We have the split phase AC units that draw power in the summertime. In most of the apartment buildings, we're finding there isn't a capacity problem. One season is offsetting the other. If you're installing a heat pump to replace your heating and cooling in your unit and you have electric heat, you have an offset that works quite efficiently. And there are other ways of looking at the future demands. But But cooling, of course, is obviously a huge priority for everybody as we go forward. We talked about townhouses doing forced air gas to heat. It's an interesting thing, but I was trying to recall, but the demand from a furnace that is forced air gas is just simply for the circulation pump. That's all it is for the blower. There is no more than that. The demand from a heat pump, however, that is going to be heating as well as cooling in the summer, it has a significant increase. And it's interesting because if we look at places like Thompson, Okanagan, where they have hot summers, they plan for this. Heat pumps were a normal part of the life cycle of those zones in those regions. So there's sufficient demand already planned for those communities. But if we go to Metro Vancouver and Victoria, we have buildings that are having challenges with demand where they are doing conversions, especially with bare land and townhouse. So, we're also starting to now see gas fireplaces being converted to heat pumps with electric demands, or gas fireplaces being converted to electric fireplaces that provide some level of ambient heating. That's another demand that gets put on the systems. And now we're starting to see gas hot water going to electric or to a heat pump system. And those, of course, additionally are all placing a lot of demand on the building. So, I think the cautionary tale here is you get your report done. Nobody can tell you exactly what the future is going to look like. But when you're doing these upgrades, you probably need an additional consultant before you do them to do it kind of a deep dive into what your demand capacity and what the tolerance is of the service systems coming into the building.
Yep, exactly.
So reducing demand, we have three different systems that are in use in the province. LED conversions. These happen in mid-rise, high-rise buildings frequently with substantial savings and cost recovery that is in most cases under 2 years. It's a great way to reduce operating costs, electrical demand, eases up power for other things in your buildings. A number of buildings that had borderline power to do an EV upgrade for their parking garage did LED conversions and have a substantial amount of power available. So there are some real easy ways of doing this. Solar rooftop installations generate a fair amount of power, but it is British Columbia and we do have dark winters. So it isn't going to be you're not going to get the peak throughout the whole cycle, but they do have a substantial return. And that is beneficial for corporations. And then we have energy management systems. So for example, when electric vehicles are being charged in a parking garage, if they're on a network, there can be a management system to mitigate the amount of demand at any given time and even isolate charging to certain times of the day that are low demand as we go forward. Here's under the Act, Regulation 511 sets out what information has to be included. It's a detail of a regulation. I'm not going to read it through. Again, the bulletin that we have available goes through all of these details and information. One of the things I really caution people to do is scrutinize the service that's being provided. Is somebody actually coming on site? Is the person who is certifying the report the person who was on site or having access to all the resource and the information? There needs to be a connection there so you can rely on the reports. This is a short report. This is for strata corporations in a small bare land, for example. And we have a number of these where there might be only 6 or 8 units, and each one gets their service directly from the utility provider. There isn't a distribution transformer on the site. These do exist. And so this is a very short report. It just basically identifies the different type of service that it is direct power delivered. In most bare lands, however, it is not direct power. It is coming through some sort of transformer distribution system, and it is a full report that's required. Going back one more time, it is a one-time report. It has to be maintained as a record of the strata. It has to be attached to a Form B once you have it done, same way as the depreciation report. and there is no exemption. There is no voting threshold that's permitted. There's no exemption. Everybody has a compliance requirement. The little details in the reports, the date of the report, name of the person who provided the report. This is also the person who actually did the research and the work with you. The qualifications of the person, if they have any errors in emissions insurance, and if they have any relationship with your strata corporation. We talked about current capacity, but look at the list of existing demands on your building systems. EV charging unit by unit may not be substantial, but if you're in a townhouse complex or a Bearland strata and you have individuals with stage 3 chargers, they have a huge demand. And if you go to your local gas stations that now have charging stations, we have a number of petrocamps that have charging stations in tiers. They are basically level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging stations. You can see how much power a level 3 charging station is going to put out. That's demand on your systems at the same time. Most buildings are using a level 1 and level 2 chargers now. It's easier on your entire systems, and overloading your demand is just really not appropriate. So let's talk about evaluating the systems, John, because I think this is where we're getting into some challenges with reports that people are finding confusing. I know, what are the common things that you're seeing?
A couple of the common things that we're seeing are that buildings that have kind of an ambiguity about exactly how much the loading is, looking at the aggregated data, if the wire comes in and it goes to the common meter and then all the other meters. Some buildings actually have a single meter that measures the entire thing, and that makes it very clear. But some of them we have to get aggregated data, and there's not a completely consistent consensus on exactly how to calculate that. So that's one of the things that the industry is kind of struggling with. And if there are multiple different things using energy, like a sauna or just odd types of things, it's hard to know. And then the gas use of gas makeup air in particular, how much heating that provides as opposed to the heating on the baseboards, how much heating is from the gas fireplaces as opposed to the electric baseboards. That's something that we see when we do it because we do look at the gas bills, but some of the EPR providers are not doing that.
You know, you mentioned saunas, electric saunas for 2 or 4 person in basements, in townhouses, Bearlands, even in apartment buildings, and even within buildings where they are part of common areas. They have a pretty high demand power.
Mm-hmm.
But they're being overlooked on reports, we're noticing. And so, again, this is where you need the aggregate demand for the building, but at what frequency are they being used, right? Those types of things are really quite important when evaluating the capacity. So I think the recreational facilities are not being monitored close enough when reports are being done. That's one of the challenges also that we're seeing. Um, so if you took a townhouse complex with 24 gas furnaces and they all converted over to heat pumps, that's a huge demand increase. And we actually have one in Richmond where they are split between 2 different sections, but one section doesn't have enough power to allow people to put heat pumps in.
That's very common. You'll get a number of different pad mount transformers on the site, and you'll see that some of them are extremely heavily loaded and others are not. And you also have different demands. Some people are getting electric vehicles over here, others want heat pumps over here. So it is pretty difficult. The gas powered townhomes are the most tricky ones to work on. And I want to revisit the energy management systems, Tony, as well. That's one of the
Yeah.
parts which is least defined. It's not well defined in code and it's not well defined in practice. They are very useful devices and potentially can help stratas save energy and avoiding upgrades and replacing transformers or wire. But it's quite another stage beyond the EPR to actually evaluate how they can do that on a given site. So that is an example of something that It's generally just mentioned in the reports, but would be a kind of a second stage for someone to figure out how to put it in.
You're kind of scaring me a little bit. It's like
Sorry.
no, no, not at all. But in reading through all the reports that people send in and looking at the different perspectives, there are people out there doing great reports that make logical sense, that are easy to read, that have great summaries on them. And then there's other reports that I'm looking at and I'm thinking, I'm not really sure what the status of their capacity is here.
Hmm.
Like it's complicated. This is not just it's not just about plugging into the wall. This is a much more complicated report, I think, than the public realized.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So upgrades. So we get into other things like, and this comes down to questions I think that the consumer should ask. Things like, at what point should we considering upgrades to our building systems that may help to facilitate better power, that may help to facilitate more demand, to reduce the risk, etc. You know, older buildings, certainly antiquated equipment. We talk about this a lot. That is overdrawing. That can be an issue. Systems that are not being maintained or repaired. Systems with filters where the filters are never changed. They overwork. The life cycle is short. We have we have a number of those issues as we go through. But then we have the other thing that is way beyond everybody's control, which is there may be a delivery capacity to your property. Your utility may not be able to give you any more power without significant upgrades to the neighborhood. I think you've come across a few of those.
Yeah, there are some like that. And generally, they are the ones with gas heating. So, especially if you have gas heating, pay a lot of attention to gas being included as part of the scope of the RFP. And I wanted to also say it's not all doom and gloom and scare. We often get some pleasant surprises that there's a ton of electric capacity unexpectedly. I guess the planners for the building were thinking there'd be a lot more electric heating. In some cases, there are particularly older apartment buildings. There are things like saunas or pools that were electrically heated are now just defunct and converted to exercise rooms. So that gives a lot extra power in your power budget.
I get asked the question a lot, quite frequently, and in all fairness to the public, it's a good question. Why don't we have enough power now? Why wasn't this planned? And I think you've explained it. But the challenge we had was the amount of electrical that was provided was offset by all of those other functions that were supported by gas. And so it wasn't like you didn't get 100% electrical. What you really got was 60% electrical, 40% offset by gas because it was providing your heating and your hot water, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. And
exactly.
so that's how the systems were designed at the time. I don't think anybody was anticipating the heat domes and the necessity for cooling and heat pumps that we're facing now.
Yeah.
Um, this is just a list of all the different types of systems that the site visit is going to basically disclose and require, and I think they're really important. One of the things about the PV systems on the rooftops, as we go through, and we have some done in the province, and they've been a great success. They have to be coordinated with roof replacements. If you're going to put in a new roof, it's a great time to be looking at coordinating to be putting in some PV systems. You don't want to do it prematurely before a roof is replaced. It's a great time to integrate that into new systems. We talked about building billing statements from BC Hydro, but other things. There is an electrical operating permit. Everybody has one. Where's your logbook? I bet you most people couldn't find it if they have one. So I know we could not for our building. So it's a little bit of a checklist to figure out how we're dealing with that. But also lists of unit sizes and heating systems. Those things are incredibly valuable to get going. So we get started. So we do RFPs. We're doing an updated request for proposals that will release later this week. Everybody on today's call, you'll automatically get an email with it included. But we've added in a number of questions that are important to do. You can pay for your electric planning report either out of your operating budget or out of your contingency reserve fund. It can be a pretty straightforward one-time cost. However, when you're doing it, if you're going to be doing it, get your estimate soon so you can put it into your annual budget for approval or get a resolution for the approval of the expense. Okay, John, this is all over to you now. And so here's one of the big questions that no one's asking for the most part, but how is the team of the electric planners calculating the aggregated use of electricity in your community?
Exactly. That's the big question. And the answer, the best answer is that they would put a meter on your building, but very, very few people are doing that. It's kind of an extra cost, but anyone who's really keen on this is interested, if you can get an electric meter added to the building that measures the entire electricity and the peak power, it'll be very helpful. More typical, if it's a BC Hydro, you can talk to BC Hydro, the consultant will talk to them, get those records, and they will get the annual profile of every hour with the consumption from all the suites added to the main meter. And then you can pick the highest one, which is usually January or February, and then multiply it by a factor. And that's where it gets a little difficult to answer which kind of factor to convert it to the actual peak, because that is just an hour. Um, and then looking at the peak loads, looking at the equipment, correlating it with that. Is there a peak in the summer for air conditioning more prevalent in the Okanagan? Um, yeah, looking at exactly how are you going to deal with all these potential air conditioning or heat pump additions, and the calculations based on actual demand for delivery service or like for like replacement. I believe that means, are you just looking at replacing that big boiler with a gigantic electric resistance kettle, or would you look at putting in a heat pump, which you use about half of the peak power? And I think I've rambled enough there, Tony.
No,
Any key points?
it's a really good point, though. I think in the RFPs, the questions that you're asking are really important, and
Mhm.
insist that you're getting answers to these too, because this is going to determine the quality of the electric planning report you're getting. This may not be that critical in a 12-unit townhouse complex or a 20-unit small apartment building. It is going to be critical, though, when we're dealing with a 250 unit high rise that has multiple participants, and especially if you're in a place that has airspace parcel agreements with shared type services and utilities. These are not simple reports; they are quite complex.
Mm.
So now here we go to some of the other issues that we have. Is we have the different types of heating.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of hammered this point a lot, but it is an important one. My little hobby horse is that you should know that if you have electric baseboard heating, you probably have a lot of electric capacity. It's not guaranteed, but you probably are less likely to have problems. If you have gas heating, you want to make sure you get someone who looks at things very carefully, because that's where you have more likelihood of needing to upgrade and have to pay for a new transformer, a new electric service. So you want to really get a lot of detail and push the consultant hard for that. Um, yeah, so you want to make sure you don't get pushed into having an upgrade, which is unnecessary. We have seen a lot of reports where it is electric baseboards and it seems it's unlikely they really would need to upgrade, and they get concerned because the consultants has implied in the report that they do need to. But with a little more careful look, you could find out a way of avoiding that. And again, that looking at the boilers, making sure you don't let them just say, well, it's this size of electric water heater, it's this size of space heating boiler. Let's just put in exactly the same thing with a kind of a giant toaster type mentality. Um, yeah.
Yeah, you- you're not going nuclear on what your next
Mhm.
conversion is going to be, right? And in overpowering is we're finding a number of times not necessary. Um, so in your RFP, look for all of the items that are unique to your Strata Corporation. Do you have a sauna? Do you have hot tubs? Do you have um, um, items in your buildings that are going to have a significant demand as you're going forward? You look at your delivery capacity from your utility provider as well. What is available to your community, because that can have a huge impact as a strata corporation on giving permission to what's taking of to upgrades. If you have deficiencies in your system, get them identified. This is a great time to be doing corrections or upgrades that are necessary. They're not part of a regulatory review. Once your electric planning report is done, it is your document as a strata corporation. There is no regulator who looks at these. So get it right the first time and be really clear on your expectations as you go forward. We've talked about the scenario, but this is a problem that we're coming up quite a bit with right now. And this is fairly common. Townhouse complex, all the units with gas furnaces, 8 have converted to heat pumps, 4 have air conditioners. There are 4 level 2 charging stations, but the Strata has now reached its capacity. I'm actually describing a Strata in Richmond in this very condition right now. And so the difficulty they're having is how do they do an upgrade? So the recommendation for them, of course, is to consult with an electrical engineer to see what options and upgrades are available. If do they have to do other changes other than just capacity for delivery? There may be other items, but it comes down into the first served, first altered. So what about the other 26 units or 28 units that haven't converted to heat pumps? Now, are they waiting? Do they not have this permission? Do they not have the allowance? So, this is where we're coming into this kind of problem. And this was one of the intentions of electric planning reports, was to try to identify these situations and get them resolved within communities. And again, here we go to a first connected, first served status. So these are the kind of issues I think that we're trying to avoid for everybody. Just a quick little note about the Strata Energy Advisor program through the Zero Emissions program. They provide a coaching service. They help you get your electric planning reports done, which is a very helpful service. They will help to source out and coach for you the rebates and the financing. Around cooling, mechanical systems, there are sources for consultants, support with bylaw amendments for planned upgrades. There's a feasibility engineering study available, lots of resources, and it's a no-cost resource to the public. This is a support program that basically helps your strata coach through your energy needs and your energy capacity. So it's ideal to get through this process as we go through. So I'm going to just jump into a whole bunch of questions now, John. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people who have loads and loads of questions. So let me just start at the top. Daryl, are there any that just kind of stick out for you here?
I would say the big one is probably confusion about what needs to be in the report, even with reports that have been provided being maybe not even technically accurate in some ways. It seems like a lot of people have reports that even their electricians or engineers aren't understanding.
Right, right. Um, okay. Do you want to venture in on that, John?
Yeah, that it's a little frustrating for everyone concerned. Um, I think the regulation was done in good faith in trying to get everybody a heads up. And there is a guide out there which is quite extensive and was well thought through, but there really are, as we said, a lot of unknowns, both in terms of kind of calculation methodology, which are evolving, new products which are evolving, ideas like, Tony was saying, if you put in a level 3 charger that hogs all the power of, in some cases more power than an entire strata. And so the amount that you can share amongst electric cars is a design strategy, which is kind of evolving. So there are a lot of things which we've got kind of a snippet of what we can do right now in terms of figuring out what the electric capacity is and what's coming at you. Um, so I guess the overall story is there is a lot of information there, um, but a lot of it will take a little unpacking and future thinking and talking.
Okay, there's a question here that we've been dealing with about the BC Hydro aggregate report, but what about the different jurisdictions like New Westminster, Nelson, that have their own utilities? Some of them are providing an aggregate report and some of them are not. So you have to start with your utility provider and your municipality, correct, John?
Exactly. And that is when they, yeah, definitely push them. New West, I know, is trying to figure out a way of doing this. All the utilities are, some of them, Penticton, are ahead of the curve. But I think what happens is if they don't have that aggregated data, is they fall back on the original code, which was a way of calculating, okay, how big is the wire we need to provide to this building? And so they're basically redoing that calculation, and surprise, surprise, the conclusion is that your capacity electric wire is already sized properly. So then if you add extra stuff to it, the story is, well, you can't because it's sized properly. But what we know from looking at the ones that do have that aggregated consumption is that we use far less electricity than that calculation. So that calculation is very generous, and that's what is allowing us to add heat pumps and electric vehicles without having to upgrade. So it's kind of a long story, but right now, just realize that your reports may overstate the existing electric consumption, and your alternatives are bear with your utility and gently remonstrate for ways of doing this that show that electric actual use. And another thing you can do is ask a consultant or a contractor to put a power meter on the whole building, and that will give you a straight answer on exactly how much power you're actually drawing, which is likely far less than the calculation in that report.
Thank you. There's a comment here about the total elimination of gas, and that being a concern. I share that concern, and that is not a legislative or agenda item at this point. We still have gas services throughout the province for all regions. It's not being eliminated. And when strata corporations are doing major upgrades on items such as gas fireplaces, which we talked about last week, as they age, they do require some significant upgrade, maintenance, and service, which unfortunately some strata corporations are not doing. But just for the safety and efficiency of owners, we encourage everybody to do that. Converting a gas fireplace to an electric fireplace was part of last week's discussion because it's come up a number of times. The only point about that is in the event that you do that to ensure that the gas is decommissioned properly. So, it is a separate issue as we go forward. So I'm trying to get through all these questions. So the stratas in a 50-year-old concrete, it's an older building. It's 50 years old with 54 units. The current capacity doesn't allow for all 54 units to install heat pumps. So that would be understandable given the age of the building and at the time the building was designed. The strata is going to develop a resolution that allows them to force all units to have a heat pump to disable them if the building begins to reach its capacity. So, it's a really complicated problem, and this goes into the whole issue of who gets the power first in communities where there is limited resource or access for power. And I think it'd be really important to have that discussion with first the person who's doing your electric planning report. Talk to them about if there are ways that this could be a managed system, or if there are other potentials here for that. And then the other side is a resolution like that really has to look at a bylaw and the fairness to all owners. So you definitely want to make sure you've had some sound legal advice on that before you pass such a resolution, because you could be prejudicing an owner quite easily. Is an electrical permit for a strata a city requirement? And is that permit necessary for an owner of the heat pump rebate? The electric operating permit is a requirement under Technical Safety BC. So you will find that, and there's been a little bit of a push on that in the last year. It's not a strata lot requirement, but it is a requirement in a building under the regulations for Technical Safety BC. And this is to ensure safe operating of systems. As a strata, how do we determine if we need a full EPR or the short form version? If you're in a small bare land strata, maybe even a duplex doesn't apply anyhow, but we do have some townhouses that are only 5 or 6 units, where each unit has a direct line from the distribution area from the street. They don't go through a distribution transformer on your site. That's how you determine whether you're a short version and a long version. Doug's got a question that everybody is struggling with, and this is such a challenge. How can heat pumps be installed in high-rise condos with no outside patios? Almost impossible. If there's no deck or balcony, they may have to be an internally installed unit, and it will probably a modification to a window area, some glazing. It's expensive and it's complicated. John?
Yeah, I've thought about a lot about that question, and a lot of people are working on solutions for that. Obviously, in many cases, just a portable AC unit is used, but often there's a lot of glazing and it gets really hot inside. So there are actually products that'll mount against the wall. And as Tony said, it would have to replace an entire section of a window wall window to get the air in and out of it. But there are some solutions for it.
Yeah, it's a building modification, Doug. So it does get expensive, and you will need the consulting services of a building envelope engineer as well when you're doing this, to ensure that all the safety requirements and the modifications to the glazing are effective. Cheryl, Cheryl, your question is probably the most common that we're getting. We're only 12 units, built in 88, no plans to enable electric charging other than a couple folks who plug into existing outlets and pay $30 a month, which, by the way, a lot of buildings are doing, and it's working incredibly well without a massive increase on demand. If you have multiple charging systems, though, make sure that you're actually looking at a management system, because it really does help to distribute power more evenly across your use periods. How do we do this absolutely the least expensive way for us to comply? Talk to the planner. Explain to the planner what you do, what you have, what your intentions are for use, and keep it fairly straightforward and simple, and let them know what your expectation is. Most of the planners are doing a pretty decent job with this with the smaller communities, and they're really working at accommodating people. I'm just gonna go on here. Brady. Thanks, Brady. Good question. Any recommendations how to find the best a reputable EPR delivery service? It's all over the board right now, isn't it, John? We're seeing really great, competent, detailed reports, and we're seeing reports that I just couldn't tell you what the capacity or what the delivery ability of this community is. So I think a lot of it is not in as much as finding a reputable delivery service, but making sure you're getting your request for proposals in writing. get them to detail what they're going to deliver, how they're going to deliver it, how they're going to calculate it. It's not just a quote by email saying, oh, we're going to charge $3,500 to do a report. I have no idea what that report is going to look like.
And
Ask the
I've
right
read
questions.
exactly. And when you ask the right questions, if you don't get any answers or very confused answers, then perhaps that's they haven't thought through those questions. Be one
Yeah.
way to evaluate.
What do you have to report somewhere when your report's been completed? No, it is not regulated. It becomes a part of the record of the Strata Corporation, and you have to maintain it in your records and include it with a Form B information certificate. Which sort of oversight or regulations are in place governing the companies that do this? Well, the Professional Engineers Association will regulate those who are within the professions, the electrical engineers and I'm trying to think of the Association of Technologists also, certified electricians. Most of the service providers who are coming along are within a regulatory function. So, it's that unto itself is helpful. But again, go back to your RFP, ask the right questions, ask for their credentials, ask if they have insurance, get a copy of the insurance if you're at all concerned as you go forward with this. It's one of the things that oftentimes gets overlooked. Okay.
Also, we can ask for references, ask them for other stratas, and ask for examples of EPRs that they can give a redacted example.
Anne says that her electric report is very difficult to understand. Any suggestions to help us find out after all the money they paid for support? I'd say give John a call. It's the Strata Energy Advisor Service provides a lot of details and services. There's no charge for it, but give them a call. And they'll walk you through what you have and try and help you figure out if you need more detailed information. And that will make a big difference as you go forward. I'm just going to keep going here. We're going to run out of time shortly too. That's my other challenge. Service. Should we consider an EV ready plan or opportunity assessment at the same time as the EPR? Good question. John?
Yes, you should. As I think someone pointed out later on that, yeah, that's a good idea because almost all of the same information is included in both. And there is a rebate for the EV Ready plan. So a lot of providers, a lot of the better ones are providing both. Caution though, the ones that are mostly done just electric vehicle plans, sometimes are very focused on that and are not really up to speed on looking at the whole capacity, and they will skimp over that. And they'll call it an electric planning report sometimes when it's not actually.
Where can we find examples of a heat pump bylaw? It's a good question. What we're going to provide through the SEA program is an evaluation process for a heat pump bylaw. But the difficulty is no two strata corporations are the same. So a bylaw that may fit one strata corporation might be totally inappropriate for another. Different types of buildings, different ages of buildings, different numbers of units, how your systems are designed. All of these things have to be taken into consideration when you're writing a heat pump bylaw. So the evaluation process will help you to make sure you get going into the right direction. How does the new CRD bylaw that requires building over 30,000 square feet reporting fit into this report? Who does this report? Well, it's not only the CRD bylaw, but it's also the City of Vancouver that requires reporting for buildings of 50,000 square feet and over that are 4 floors or more. These are not the same reports. Certainly there can be information gleaned from these. The reporting, the consumption reporting that goes to the CRD in the City of Vancouver is actually a good source of energy use for your electric planning report. So but they are not the same requirements. They are segregated. I would make sure that the information is consistent on both, though, as you go forward. I'm gonna time for probably 2 more questions.
Hey, Tony,
Okay. Yep.
what about the possibility of questioning or having a report audited if you don't feel it's something that is working?
So how would you go about that, John? I guess you would look for a peer review from another party, wouldn't you?
Um, yeah, here I stress that our program doesn't provide legal advice, nor engineering, but we can guide you to solutions like that. Getting another experienced provider, electrical engineer or consultant contractor would be, you can find out where the gaps are and things that need to be improved.
Um, Townhouse complexes are kind of in a little bit of a um, dead zone at the moment with respects to services because the Zeek program doesn't include them. But
Mhm.
can you guys help out if there's people in a townhouse that need to look at the report and figure out if they've got some credible information or not? That it would be that would be really helpful, actually.
That would be for sure. Darla's on the call here, so
Yeah.
I don't know. But I love to talk to those people, and they are often in a big crunch. But yeah,
Yeah.
we put a lot of resources to that. But I think we're all trying to figure out how to serve that space.
Well, and I think everyone has been kind of caught in a transition of energy use and conversion and reporting. And in addition, we also have EV ready plans, as well as we have our reporting to local municipalities, which it won't be just Vancouver and the CRD. There are others coming on board as well. So, it's quite a huge pressure, and it's kind of tough. It's tougher even for us to navigate what's out there sometimes and what's taking place. So, um, I think at this point, ask a lot of questions. Put your questions in writing, request responses in writing. Don't take anybody's word for it. This is no different than going out for a bid for contracts for any other kind of services. Um, yeah, Darlell, maybe we'll post that um, for resources to understand power efficient design strategies. We'll get it posted so that we can share it with everybody. Um, And we're right on time, John. I promise everybody we never go past an hour. So people have lunch, they've used their lunch time. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you wish to ask more questions, I'm going to flip back to the very first screen where John's email is, because I should have put it at the end, but there it is. Send John an email. He'd be very happy to respond to you. You can send me an email. I'm sure if it comes to an electric planning report, I will not have an answer for you, but I can find someone who can give you an answer. Staff are really happy to help, direct people in the right locations with the right people to get a good response for everybody. So again, thanks everybody for joining. Complicated problem when we start opening it up and peeling back the different layers to see where we're going with all of these. So John, thanks again.
Yep. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody.